Okay, so before we start this video, keep in mind that we recorded this before there were any injury reports on Alphonso Davies. Alright, so keep that in mind. We're going to start the video and I'll talk more about that later. Canada is about to play in the World Cup for the second time in their entire history. And even though Nike didn't care enough to make a new kit or uniform or jersey for Canada in this specific edition, I cared enough to make a full World Cup preview. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Filippo, and welcome to Tactical Manager TV, and welcome to another World Cup preview, which we're doing for many different nations. So if you missed the other ones, go check it out. There's a whole playlist for it. And today we're going to do a preview for America Junior. We'll be talking about how Canada got here, their key players, style of play, and much more. So if you don't know anything about the Canadians, you're about to learn a lot. I will also be counting with the help of a dear friend of the channel, Josh from JDD TV, the voice of Canadian soccer on YouTube. I'm putting his link on the description. Before we start the video, drop a comment down below. What do you consider a successful World Cup for Canada? Do you think they can get out of their group stage like Costa Rica did back in 2014? Do you just want them to get a point? Drop down below a realistic prediction for Canada this World Cup, and don't underestimate them if you're from Europe. And if you like maple syrup, hit that like button. Everyone likes maple syrup. So if this video has 5,000 views, it better have 5,000 likes. Thank you for hitting the like button. Let's play our beautiful intro and let's talk about Canada. Canada has only played one World Cup, and it was all the way back in 1986, where they got knocked out in the group stage, losing every single match, all 3 games, with 0 goals scored and 5 allowed. But 2022 will be different. I mean, I think it will. I would expect them to at least score a goal. This is also a team that many European nations should not underestimate. They are very tough to beat. They showed that to the United States, they showed that to Mexico, and they could surprise some this World Cup. I won't overestimate them, but I wouldn't underestimate them. And I do see a lot of nations outside of CONCACAF seeing Canada as a joke, and trust me, they are not. But why don't we talk about how did they get here? What was the process, and what did Canada go through to get back to the World Cup and the players that they have? Back in 2018, the Canadian Federation announced that John Herdman would be the coach of the Canadian men's national team. And at the time, there was skepticism in regards to that move. John Herdman only had experience coaching New Zealand and Canada's women's national team. He had no experience in the men's game. He only coached women's national team. So that was part of the skepticism, which, to be fair, I'm not here to judge which one is better. There is a reasonable difference between both, right? In terms of dealing with the players, there's different ways if you deal with a women's team and a man's team. The speed of the game, the tactics are different, set pieces. So there was a lot of worries of how John Herdman would adapt to that. And boy, he did. Now, if you head back to 2018, I would say most CONCACAF experts did not expect Canada to qualify to the 2022 World Cup, including myself, even though I'm not an expert by any means. I'm just a dude on YouTube with an iPhone recording with a very nice mic. No, but really, being completely honest, I'm not even sure Canadian fans were expecting Canada to qualify to the 2022 World Cup all the way back in 2018. However, with the right coach, the rise of a Canadian golden generation, they did. Comfortably. Canada topped the final round of CONCACAF World Cup qualifying with 8 wins, 4 draws, and only 2 losses, finishing ahead of Mexico and the United States. But not just that, Canada had the best offense with 23 goals scored and the best defense with only 7 allowed. Canada also managed to go undefeated versus the United States and Mexico by tying their away games and beating them at home. Look, I'm not trying to hype the team that was successful in CONCACAF, but we have seen CONCACAF teams surprise many in recent World Cups. Mexico always gets out of their group. Costa Rica made it to the quarterfinals back in 2014. The US men's national team made it to the quarterfinals back in 2002, where we were robbed against Germany and we should have made it to the semifinals, and then we would have played South Korea and maybe even made it to the final against Brazil. That's in 2002. Germany robbed the United States. But that's for another video. And again, I understand success in CONCACAF, which is one of the weakest confederations in the world in my opinion, does not always translate to success in the World Cup. But trust me, this Canadian team will be annoying to face. Okay, so as I said earlier in the video, Alphonso Davies got injured playing for Bayern over the weekend. At the time of this recording of this specific one, we don't have the confirmation if he's out of the World Cup or questionable. At the overall recording of this video, we recorded before anything happened, so keep that in mind while you're watching the video. Regardless, if he's questionable or out, it really hurts Canada because even if he can go, he won't be 100%. Now, as I said earlier too, and I will be saying throughout the video, this Canadian team is more than just Alphonso Davies. They defeated the United States 2-0 without Alphonso Davies. So keep that in mind. With him out or injured or questionable coming off the bench or not fully fit, other players will have to step up. And I think they could. This Canadian team can still cause trouble even if their world-class superstar left back or left midfielder winger, that's how he plays for them, even if he's out. All right. And I'll be dropping a comment down below and I'll pin it, letting you know any updates on Alphonso Davies that we have after we post this video. Oh, and if you're Canadian, I don't mean to be rude, but you guys probably will get knocked out in the group stage, but you never know. It's the World Cup. Anything can happen. Oh, and check out the Rude Canadian t-shirt at the Tactical Manager TV store. Yes, I am self-promoting myself. High five. So here's the question. Could Canada be one of those teams that I just mentioned, like the 2002 United States, 2014 Costa Rica, or just like Mexico and get out of their group? Or will they be just another version of the 2018 Panama? Personally, I think they are neither. I think they will be right in between that. But we'll talk more about that later when Josh is in the video. But before we bring Josh, there's a couple points I want to make to the people that might not know the Canadian men's national team that well. This team is more than just Alphonso Davies. When you dive into their roster, there are plenty of players that I could mention, but the main ones that I would like to talk to you to watch out for would be Jonathan David from Lille in France, Eustaquio that's been killing it for Porto and Portugal this season, a fantastic central midfielder, Tajon Buchanan, Kyle Larin that both play for Club Brugge that have been enjoying some success in Belgium. I do also want to give a shout out to Ismael Kone from Montreal. To me, he's one of the highest ceiling MLS young players currently, and I'll not be surprised if he gets a few minutes here and there in the World Cup and even leads to a move to Europe. They have plenty of other players that I could mention here, but I do also want to give a shout out to their goalkeeper that wears sweatpants. I doubt he'll be wearing sweatpants in Qatar. I mean, it's too hot there, but up here in North America during the winter, the dude played soccer with sweatpants. Another thing I want to mention before we bring in Josh is I don't know how Canada will do this World Cup. But to me, Canada is more of a 2026 team rather than a 2022 team. A lot of their stars are very young and they'll be closer to their prime in 2026. But again, no team should underestimate them. I have done that a lot and it did not go well. Yeah, I sort of went trending in Canada once for the 2-point window. If you don't know what that is, you don't need to know what it is. I predicted a 2-point window for Canada during World Cup qualifying and it didn't go well. But enough of me. Let's bring in Josh, the Canadian expert, to talk about this current national team, and he will also be giving us the best 11 that he thinks that Canada should play, main players. He'll talk about it in depth because he knows much more than me about the Canadian men's national team. So now let's bring in Josh. And before we do that, don't forget to smash the like button because I won't be requesting it anymore in this video. Thank you very much. Let's bring in Josh. Okay, Josh, back here in the channel to talk about Canada. Today, what I want to do in this episode is I want anyone that doesn't know anything about the Canadian men's national team to learn, because you guys haven't been to the World Cup in a while. It's been a decade or two or three. Almost.
86. 86 was the last time.
It's been a while, right?
Yeah.
None of us were born then.
No, we weren't.
But why don't we get right to it? The first thing that I want to know is your perspective, and I want to know a little bit about the country, Canada, right now. What's going on there? What is the vibe? What is the expectation from yourself? And we'll talk about the group here. I'll put it on screen, the matchups that you guys have. The Japan one is a friendly before the World Cup. Then you play Belgium, Croatia, and Morocco. What is going on in Canada? What's the expectation from yourself in this World Cup? And what is the expectation from the country? Is the country embracing the event? What's going on?
Yeah, the country is definitely embracing the event. I mean, I've been following our national team for as long as I can remember. I had very low expectations. There's been a few instances over the past 5 or so years where there was glimpses of what Canada could potentially do. They had a really good Gold Cup, but then they got knocked out against Haiti. They had a big result against you guys, and then we flipped that result and lost 4-1 in the Nations League and got knocked out. So again, leading into the beginning of World Cup qualifying, I as a realist was like, all right, I think there's a good chance we can make it to the octagonal, and then from there, I could see us finishing 5th, 4th, 3rd. I really didn't know. No one really knew, but the hype train started happening as the basically the qualifiers started going on. The more serious it got, the more interest Canada started picking up. It also, I think it helped knowing that the 2026 World Cup is Canada's a co-host, but I remember following it, and a lot of interest started happening on my channel, and people started taking notice. And then once we made it to the octagonal, I think that was the big moment where people were like, okay, Canada finally made it to this last hurdle. Let's see what we can do. And again, leading into it, looking at it now, you probably thought, okay, it's crazy to think Canada wasn't going to qualify, but there was a lot of expectations because Honduras, Panama, like these, even El Salvador, these are different countries that have made it to the World Cup. On top of some of the big hitters, and then the Jamaica, like we really didn't know what to expect from Canada. So there wasn't that expectation now at the beginning because people just didn't really know what to get, including myself. I think I predicted Canada would finish fourth, wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt. And then we obviously...
Can I interrupt you there for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, it's funny because I went trending on Canada right there for my 2-point window prediction. Remember that?
Yeah.
I predicted Canada. For anyone who doesn't know, I predicted Canada would get a 2-point window on the January one that they faced the United States in World Cup qualifying, and they got 9. They won every single game. But the funny thing is that you said you predicted Canada to finish fourth before. I actually had Canada qualifying directly as a top 3. You remember that?
Yeah. Because you don't know, like just because there's a lot of like good looking talent on paper doesn't mean that they were going to perform. I thought there was going to be a lot of cracks around the star players in Canada, and just not having the experience, I really didn't know, and then it just turned out a lot of those cracks.
But I think what caught my attention was before they made to the final 8, they performed well away in those knockout rounds of Suriname and Haiti. Haiti, right? Yeah, Haiti that you guys faced. And then I saw Canada playing in the Gold Cup, and I thought that was a team to qualify because you guys actually played better than Mexico in the semifinals, which was mainly the best players of Mexico. Those were most of their best players. You played against the US's B or C team, whatever the heck that was, and Canada got very unlucky, that 1-0 win that the United States got. So from that perspective, I had Canada in 3rd place. Obviously, so it's kind of weird. Sometimes I overestimate Canada, sometimes I underestimate Canada. But anyhow, back to what you're saying about how the country is seeing this, because the United States right now, it's like mixed feelings, right? With Greg Berhalter, but Canada, there's definitely only reasons to be excited, right?
Yep, yeah, and that was kind of the where I was going with it, is just throughout qualifiers when, like I said, myself, someone who's followed this national team for a long time, including others, thought they were going to maybe just squeak in. They started just exceeding expectations, and that started getting a lot of confidence around. We topped the group. We're going to the World Cup. We got put in an intriguing group, but I think there's a lot of confidence around this national team still. I think the players are getting better. Those other, like, different players stepped up and gotten a lot better. Stephen Eustaquio, Tajon Buchanan are 2 big names that come to mind. I think that there's a real expectation that Canada, like, again, I'm a little bit of a, because like you look at the group, I mean, you look at two of those clubs right there, basically 2nd and 3rd of the last World Cup. Like, it's hard to look past that, but I think there's a lot of question marks around Belgium, and there's a lot of just expectation and excitement. First World Cup in a long time, overachieved to get here. Anything can happen. And me personally, just think back of the Costa Rica group and how they, with Uruguay, Italy, and England, topped it. So you can't rule it out, but I think that a lot of Canadians think that there's a chance that we could finish probably like 2nd place. Because I don't want to be biased. I kept saying like a safe 3rd, but I mean, I don't know. I think that there is an opportunity. I think that if there's one of the Croatia or Belgium to slip up, I think it's going to be Belgium.
You sound cautiously optimistic, but here's my question to you before we get to the group, which, by the way, everyone, what you're seeing on screen right now is the Japan friendly, and then Canada's group is Belgium, Croatia, and Morocco. So my question to you is this: when Canada signed John Herdman, he only had experience coaching women's national teams, if I'm not mistaken, before that. Clearly it worked. I don't think anyone in their right mind can question that right now. But were you a little bit skeptical of how he would transition from one game to another? Because there's similarities and there's differences. It didn't seem like he felt any difference on it.
No, there was a lot of people were skeptical when they signed. Like, I don't 100% know why. I just think they probably thought the men's game is so much different than the women's game. This is a giant step. You're literally going from Canada women's to Canada men's. He kind of hit the ground running. He did really well in recruiting a lot of dual nationals. He had a solid Gold Cup tournament, but then it ended up crashing out against Haiti in the quarterfinals, and that raised a lot of eyebrows, being like, okay, like, what did we sign up for? The Nations League, I mean, picking up the win against the US, I think that was, like I said, that was the kind of start, even though we didn't make it to the finals of the Nations League. And then after that, it's just been smooth sailing. John Herdman's done an excellent job of transitioning his game, learning, constantly finding different solutions. I mean, when we talk about between Greg and John, we talk about tactical battles, and John Herdman has proven so much time that he knows how to adjust on the fly. He knows how to get his best out of his players. He's still very young. This is brand new to him, to the players. I mean, yes, he's got experience in the women's side of the game, but this is going to be his first big test on the world's biggest stage with the men. And I'm very curious to see how he's going to handle that. We just had a nice little test against Uruguay. I thought he kind of played into their hands a little bit, just the way that, you know, the style of Uruguay, sitting back, allowing Canada to have the ball and then kind of hitting you on the counter. It was still exciting, I think, to see Canada have so much of the ball and create so many chances, weren't able to score. But all in all, after what I've seen from qualifying and even in the friendlies, even the 2-0 loss against Uruguay, they dominated Qatar. I think that they could do something, but it's just how these players are going to hold their nerves, how the tactical battles are going to go. And honestly, like, big players on the other opposition having poor games, like Kevin De Bruyne, in my opinion, can win a game on his own. So if we can deal with a player like that, maybe there's an opportunity. If not, we could be in a little bit of trouble. But I have confidence that we could potentially pull up an upset, but it wouldn't shock me if we don't.
Now, before we talk about players specifically, I want to go through the group real quick. You guys kick it off with Belgium, right? That's the first game for Canada. Then you play Croatia. Then you play Morocco in the last game. Going by just looking on paper, Belgium and Croatia are the top dogs of the group, and then Canada and Morocco technically battle for that third place on paper. Which once the ball's rolling, it's 100% irrelevant. Morocco's game is going to depend 100% if it matters or not on the first two games. Would you say the game, because you mentioned right there that you think if one team is going to get knocked out of the big dogs right there, it's going to be Belgium. So do you think the first game is the key one?
I think so. I think if we can get a point at bare minimum off of Belgium, then it gives us an opportunity. Because even if we lose to Croatia, and depending on other results, we looking at if we win against Morocco, we're 1-1-1. Who knows what Belgium could be? That gives us a fighting shot on 4 points. I mean, if we get a win against Belgium, obviously that would be massive as well. But like, it's gonna be tough. I just kind of like the way that Canada could line up. Like, if Lukaku isn't firing, you have a completely different Eden Hazard. If we can somehow deal with KDB, and then that back line of Belgium, after especially watching them in the past few Nations League matches, I think there's a lot of red flags around them that players like Buchanan and Davies would have a lot of fun running at that back line. I think it could be a very open match. And I think that's where Canada could do some danger, honestly. And if we can pick up a point, and Canada's done this a lot, they especially in windows, done it. I think they did it 2 or 3 times, picked up 2 draws and then ended it off with a win. So, I mean, if they can somehow sneak out 2 points, leave them a fighting opportunity. They seem when their backs are against the wall in a window, they have an opportunity to take it. But I think it'll be a statement. I mean, if Belgium come out and smack Canada 3-0, I think it'd be very difficult to overturn that and find a way out of the group. I really think the most important match, don't count the Morocco one, is how Canada will kick off the event against Belgium.
Yeah, because again, here's the thing. If Canada loses to Belgium, then they automatically need to get 4 points to go through in 2 games. So that means they would have to find a way to beat Morocco or Croatia and pull a draw in one of the other games. So if they lose to Belgium, yes, it could be a major problem. But again, if you pull a draw, also the team will start to believe that it's possible to go through, and you know how confidence can impact the whole team. And John Herdman knows how to get these players pumped. Tactics aside, player selection aside, there's also the mental aspect of the game, and John Herdman seems to master that part, right? Now, going back to Canada, because I don't really want to talk about the group as a whole for this episode, and you sort of mentioned already a few of the guys. We know Croatia, they have experience and they have a lot of talent too, Croatia. So that, to me, I agree that Croatia might be the strongest team in this group. But for Canada, you mentioned a few names there, here and there. I don't want to go through the entire team right now, but what would be the key player for Canada? Like a player that by no means you can have injured or suspended. You need him in the World Cup.
I mean, it's tough. I think that one player, if you're asking me that, again, that isn't like Alphonso Davies, is probably Stefan Eustaquio.
Okay, so wait. Let's just go back here. It would have been Alphonso Davies.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's our guy. Like, Alphonso Davies.
I mean, you guys played well without him.
Yeah, it's true. Like, he's like, Davies is the star player. You don't want him not to be there. But then after that, I think that there's a few players that come to mind. I mean, you have Jonathan David, obviously. You have Stefan Eustaquio. You have Tajon Buchanan. Even a player like Alistair Johnston has been so important for the national team. But Davies aside, because you got to give the man the respect that he's earned. If there's one player I don't want to miss out, it's him. But other than that, I think there's a very close second, and I think it's Tajon Eustaquio. I think that the rise of this man has been nothing but spectacular. He came off a really, really bad injury for a while. He's playing over in Liga MX. He then kind of went back to Portugal, didn't know exactly the player he was going to get with Passos de Ferreira, and he just completely blew up in the national team. There was a hole there because Atiba's getting older, didn't know who's going to play beside him, and his game just evolved in a way that right before my very eyes, and it was amazing to see. And then he got that big move to FC Porto. It happened in January last year, and he barely featured for them, and then he was patient, waited for his opportunities, and now he's a starter, starts pretty much week in, week out for the league and even the Champions League to score his first Champions League goal. The game that I watch from him just keeps getting better and better and better. And we don't really have an alternative to him in the Canada team. And I think that's where some of the debate could be if Eustaquio is actually more important than Davies, because you look at like a Tajon Buchanan, you have other quick players that you can slot in there, probably not the same quality, but you have options like Liam Miller, Corbiano. There are guys that can go in there, Junior Hoylett as well. There's no one that can really replace what Stephen Eustaquio brings. And if we missed him that midfield, it would be a dangerous game. I don't know exactly who could replace him and bring what he does. The defensive side of the game, the ability to get forward, set pieces, he brings a little bit of everything. And his rapid rise has been similar to Tajon, but just in a much more important role for Canada. So if you had to ask me exactly one player, again, there's maybe not Davies, it would be Stephen Eustaquio. But I mean, I think Alistair Johnston and also Tajon Buchanan deserve a shout because they've also improved so much over this past 18 months. But yeah, I think Eustaquio is probably my guy.
I think probably Davies and Eustaquio are the two irreplaceable players.
Yeah,
I would say. Right. Everyone else, there's a drop off, right? Obviously, if you don't have Jonathan David and you have to go just with Kyle Larin, there is a drop off. But he's shown, like Larin, time in, time out, he can get the job done. It just seems like the drop off from Davies, his backup, is massive because Davies is a world class player and the best player in CONCACAF right now. And Eustaquio, the drop off, who would replace Eustaquio?
And that's the question.
No
like there's not like a profile quite like his. You could, and it depends on the system, but like other options in that midfield, you could have Samuel Piette, who's a little bit more defensive. You have Mark Anthony Kaye, who would probably be the most somewhat like for like, but he just brings something that I don't think can be replaced. You also have Atiba Hutchinson, who's 39, hasn't played obviously at all this season. And then you got Ismail Kone, who's a player who I think could be a wild card for Canada. Another player who we've seen the rise grow right before our eyes. Did so well with CF Montreal. He's had some good outings with Canada. I don't know if the opportunity is going to come a little too quickly for him at the World Cup, but I expect him to be on that roster. And injuries aside, because there has been a lot of injuries to Canada's midfield, maybe there's an opportunity for a player like that. But I just can't quite see anyone who's actually going to be Eustaquio's replacement.
I like that you mentioned Ismail Kone because I've been following him with Montreal a little bit more this season to follow Jordan Mihailovic from the United States. And then I watched Kone play against Orlando as well. That is a player that needs to go to Europe soon. A major talent from Canada. One of the most, I don't know if you agree with this, one of the most talented Canadians right now. I totally, if I had to project a 2026 lineup, he would be probably in the starting 11 if you project it forward. This World Cup, maybe not yet because he wasn't really involved in the cycle as much. But it's a great time to transition to my next topic before we go to the best 11 of Canada. One rising star for Canada. And by rising star, I mean a young player. And don't put Alphonso Davies, obviously, he's not a rising star. He's already a star. Jonathan David, not a rising star. He's already a star. And players and people know him already across the globe. I want you to give the viewer, and it could be Kone, or it could be Tajon Buchanan, or any young player from Canada that you should tell. If you were telling a scout in Europe, hey, watch this kid, who would it be?
Yeah, it's going to be Ismail Kone, and I'll tell you why. I'm not going to count Tajon Buchanan because he's a little bit older. Like he's 22, I believe, right now, and he already got his move to Club Brugge. He's playing in the Champions League. You know, it's not a relatively unknown name. Davies isn't either. They're younger guys, same as Jonathan David, but it's Ismail Kone. This is a 20-year-old who kind of came out of absolutely nowhere. You've even heard John Herdman talk about his raw ability. He said he's never really seen a profile quite like his. The technique and the ability that this kid has at such a young age is on full display. It's the reason he got brought in so young to the national team. It's the reason he broke in at CF Montreal, and it's the reason that he's getting a bunch. Fabrizio Romano has tweeted about him at least 4 or 5 times. Like he's probably the biggest product to come out of Canada.
He never tweeted about me.
I know he never tweeted about me either. Just
Yeah,
disrespect,
it's
but
crazy. Not
I
even
know.
once.
It's unbelievable. But the amount of times in that late in that transfer window, he tweeted about Ismail Kone. I just think because there's a lot of interest. Sheffield United were interested in him. Norwich City were interested into him. A lot of I think it's almost a certainty, in my opinion, that someone in January is going to grab this kid. I just think that he's got so much raw talent. He's been attracting so much interest, and I think that there's a chance we could see him at the World Cup. Like I said, he's a bit of a wild card. If the injuries are there, like Jonathan Osorio's got a head injury right now.
Wait, you mean see him in the World Cup playing or roster? Yep. Roster, you don't think he's a lock?
I think he's a lock, but I think we could see him play. Like I think we could see him potentially get decently meaningful minutes, especially if some of the injuries aren't there. Like I said, like Atiba Hutchinson's 39 years old and hasn't played this season. That's not really he's a legend of Canadian soccer, but that's not really the confidence I want to see in the midfield, especially if he's just not on form. We don't know. Jonathan Osorio's got a head injury. Those can be very, very tricky depending on the system, especially if there's a three-man midfield John Herdman wants to do. I think Ismail Kone is right on that outside because he just brings something similar to Eustaquio, but brings something completely different that I don't know exactly who else could potentially bring that. Now, it's a giant jump from Major League Soccer, CF Montreal, to the World Cup, but that's why I said he could be a wild card. Maybe he comes in the Belgium match and makes a difference, and then he starts the next game. I think that he's that wild card where if you're going to keep an eye on someone to potentially blow up at this World Cup, he might be a player to do that.
Okay, so why don't we go to the final section of this video, which is what's your Canada men's national team best 11? Yours, right? You're giving me yours or John Herdman's? It's yours, right?
It's a little bit both.
Okay, so
probably mine.
Go through the formation, the players. Tell us also the club they play. I know where they play, but I'm just saying it could be someone that doesn't follow Canada as close, so they know where the guy's from. So why don't we start? What's your formation?
Formation's 4-4-2. It can adjust a little bit in game, and just for a fun fact, unlike Greg, we do use other systems. So it's kind of hard to test. We've used.
You see, I'm not even offended by that. It's 100% true, and Greg Berhalter won't change. His 4-3-3 is perfect. Don't question it. Don't question it.
But I'm just gonna let the viewers know this is what I think makes John Herdman a little bit special. These are some of those systems that he ran, and he switches in game all the time. But these are some of the systems he ran through qualifiers: 3-4-3, 3-5-2, 4-4-2, 4-2-3-1, and a 3-4-1-2. Anyways, a very consistent one for him and one I like to see is the 4-4-2. It can be tricky, again, going up against a bigger team when the opportunity of that midfield. But again, I'm just kind of going with what I like to see. In goal from Red Star Belgrade, we have Milan Borjan, pretty solid keeper. He's been.
You're gonna wear sweatpants in Qatar?
I really hope he wears sweatpants.
It's gonna be hot there, though.
Yeah, no, actually, I doubt he's gonna wear sweatpants. But when we played in very cold weather, you can expect sweatpants. But he's a very, very good keeper. He's been around the national team for a long time. He's a leader as well. He's a very underrated. I don't give him enough praise because he was excellent as well through qualifiers. He is a very, very talented keeper, and he's a big leader in the locker room, which I think is a very important attribute, especially with Atiba Hutchinson not being there. At right back, we have Alistair Johnston. He can shift in. He can play on the outside right of a back three. He can play as a wing back as well, but for Canada, he mainly features as a right back or outside right.
From Montreal in MLS.
Plays, CF Montreal. Again, a player I think who can maybe move to Europe. The two central center backs, I have Steven Victoria, plays for Chavez in the Portuguese league, and then Kamal Miller, who plays again for CF Montreal. He's a lefty. He can play on the outside left. He can play as a center back. They're the main guys. They're the guys that Herdman's given the most trust to. Don't love that CF Montreal season's over. I was hoping they could play a little bit more because, could perfectly lead them up to the World Cup, staying on great form. But those are the two center backs I have. Left back, I have Samuel Atakubi. Plays for Hatayspor in Turkey. Very, very good player as well. He was one of the best left backs in Turkey last year. He's kind of had a rocky start. Hatayspor's had a really poor start to the season, but he's still getting decent minutes and should be probably he's a lock, but I think there's potential he could even be a lock to start. He brings something. Him and Richie Larea, you can make the.
Larea, the guy that was supposedly better than Des but couldn't make it in the championship.
Yeah, because Des is having such a good season with AC Milan.
I mean, there's a difference between not making it in the championship and not making it in Barcelona.
Yeah, no, I mean you can't deny Richie's loan move was a disaster. He didn't feature at all in the championship, and he got shipped back to TFC, a very bad TFC side. So that's why I excluded him from the starting 11. I trust Atakubi more. I think that his game has progressed a lot. You see a more attacking flair to it with a real defensive responsibility as well. I like Atakubi there. Then my four midfielders, I have Tajon Buchanan at right mid, plays for Club Bruges. A player that Tack's familiar with. He came from Major League Soccer as well. really good rise. I mean, very excited. He needs to be in this team. On the left side, I have Alphonso Davies playing a little bit more advanced role, having the opportunity to go forward, using his pace. Two midfields, and again, I don't know if it's gonna be a two-man midfield, but because of the injuries, I sent you one before, Tack, but I mean, one is a lock, it's Tajon Eustaquio, and then you can kind of take that pick. I mean, I think Samuel Piette is more than likely right now going to start, but I mean, Atiba Hutchinson, we all kind of assume is going to be that man there, but again, it's as the time goes on, 39 years old, not starting a single second this year. I'm kind of falling out of the idea of him actually starting a match or even kind of featuring, depending on how fit he can get in that time. It's difficult at that age. So probably for the safe bet right now, I'm going to go with Samuel Piette. Plays for CF Montreal as well. Not the most ideal. I don't know. Like I like Samuel Piette, but I don't know if it's the most ideal starter. I don't think a lot of people pictured this. But when you play in a 4-4-2, he's a little bit more defense-oriented, can kind of link up with Eustaquio, hopefully try to plug that midfield as much as possible instead of having like an Ismael Kone or Jonathan Osorio, more attack-minded player. Could shift up if you go into midfield three, but anyways, for the two, those are the guys. And then up front, Jonathan David playing for Lille, having an excellent year. And then, of course, Kyle Larin, who is Canada's all-time leading goal scorer, always seems to turn up for the national team, but he is having a dreadful season right now with Club Brugge. He's been left out of the match day.
Orlando City legend Kyle Larin.
Yeah, he's had a good goal scoring record. I mean, he did well in Major League Soccer, did well in Turkey. He's done well for the national team, but his move to Club Brugge is he's fifth right now on their striker depth chart. So it's been a tough season for them, but that is probably some variation of my starting 11.
It's the one thing to add for context here is Club Brugge just topped their group, didn't they?
They did.
In the Champions League.
With Porto. So one of the two. So Canadian on one of the sides will be able to.
Well, regardless, it's a very strong Club Brugge side. And we saw that last season too when they played. They were placed in a very tough group last season. I remember PSG. And they did well. It's a very strong side. But Josh, that is all I had for today. Hopefully the viewers know more about the Canadian men's national team than before with this video. And before we go, is Canada getting out of their group or not? And you will be held accountable for what you say right now.
I'm going to say yes. Why not? Why not?
YOLO. You only live once. You can go with that. Haven't said that in a while, too. Josh saying Canada. I don't think Canada. Look, and I hope people don't hate me for this. Just being realistic. I don't think Canada is going to make out of their group. Okay? But just to make it clear, I have the U.S. and Mexico getting out of their group. And I'm not saying the U.S. and Mexico are better than Canada because I think Canada was placed in a tougher group than the United States and Mexico. That's what I think. And the way I measure toughness in a group in the World Cup is how strong the top two teams are. And the top two teams of the Canadian group are stronger than the top two teams of the U.S. and Mexico's group. If you go to the United States group, honestly, Croatia and Belgium can beat England. They can beat England. And they're most certainly better than the United States, which is technically the second best team in that group. And they're better than Wales and they're better than Iran. If you go to the Mexico group, Croatia and Belgium are better. They're worse than Argentina, in my opinion. Argentina should be able to beat them, but they are far better than Mexico, better than Poland, and better than Saudi Arabia. So the main reason I think the U.S. and Mexico have a higher odd of advancing is because they were placed in the easier group because of pot seeding, right? We're number 2. Right, we're number 2 seed, and that helped us. Canada's placed in the tough group, and Morocco also with a new coach and with Ziyech back is no pushover. So that is the main reason why I think I felt like I needed to put that context out there because people are just going to say I'm hating on Canada for no reason. I'm not hating on Canada.
No, up until like the last couple weeks, just because with the hype coming up, I've always said I think Canada's going to finish like third. And I've been so disrespectful to Morocco, but you just have to assume if Canada's going to get out of the group, they're going to have to take care of business against Morocco. Morocco could just as easily take care of Canada as well. So it's a tough group. It's a very tough group, and I agree. I mean, I think the U.S. and Mexico have probably a 10 times better chance. Could
you imagine if Morocco and Canada advance, like the group you mentioned with Costa Rica and Uruguay advancing, and Italy and England, right? Italy and England getting knocked out. Look, it's the World Cup. It's a short tournament. Anything can happen. These are all professional players. When the game starts, it's 11 humans playing against each other. Anything can happen. Thank you very much, everyone. Josh, thank you once again.
Appreciate it, my man.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to drop a comment down below. How far will Canada get in this World Cup, or how many goals they'll score? What is your prediction for Canada this World Cup? Don't forget to smash the like button before you go. And go check out our other World Cup previews about Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, United States, and much more. I want to thank you all very much for watching, and have a great day.